What would you do if you had to choose between saving a stranger's life and letting go of the past that's been haunting you for 15 years? This is the impossible situation that Rebecca Chen found herself in on a cold December night in Chicago. And what happened next will make you question everything you think you know about fate, loss, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and child. Rebecca had been a trauma nurse at St. Mary's Hospital for 12 years, and she was good at her job, maybe too good. She could compartmentalize, could shut off her emotions when a patient coded, could make split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. But this ability to detach, this professional armor she wore, it wasn't something she'd learned in nursing school. It was something she'd been forced to develop after the worst day of her life, a day that happened 15 years ago when her 5-year-old son Daniel was taken from her. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday at the park. Rebecca had been watching Daniel play on the swings, had turned away for just 30 seconds to answer a phone call from work. And when she looked back, he was gone. The police searched for months. The FBI got involved. Her face was on every news channel begging for her son's return. But there were no leads, no witnesses, nothing. Daniel had vanished like he'd never existed, and after 2 years of dead ends and false hopes, he was legally declared deceased. Rebecca's marriage fell apart, her world crumbled, and the only thing that kept her breathing was throwing herself into her work, saving other people's children because she couldn't save her own. She never talked about Daniel at work, never mentioned that she understood exactly what the parents in the ER waiting room were going through when their kids came in critical. It was easier to be professional, to be strong, to lock that part of herself away in a box she never opened. But on this particular December night, that box was about to be ripped wide open in a way Rebecca never could have imagined. It was 11:45 p.m. when the ambulance radioed in. They were bringing in a John Doe, approximately 20 years old, found unconscious in an alley with severe head trauma and hypothermia. No ID, no phone, nothing. Rebecca was assigned to his case the moment he rolled through the doors. The young man was in bad shape. His heart rate was dangerously low. His body temperature was barely registering, and he had a skull fracture that was causing brain swelling. Rebecca had seen hundreds of cases like this, but something about this patient made her hands shake as she cut away his frozen clothes and hooked him up to monitors. Maybe it was his age, maybe it was the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, or maybe it was something deeper that she couldn't explain. For the next 6 hours, Rebecca fought like she'd never fought before. This stranger, this John Doe, he coded 3 times, and 3 times Rebecca brought him back. She manually compressed his chest, shocked his heart, intubated him when he stopped breathing on his own, and refused to call time of death, even when the attending physician suggested it might be time to let him go. Something primal inside Rebecca wouldn't allow it. She couldn't lose another one, couldn't watch another young person slip away, not on her watch, not tonight. By 6 in the morning, against all odds, the patient stabilized. His vitals were weak but steady. The swelling in his brain had stopped increasing, and he was alive. Rebecca stood at his bedside, exhausted and shaking from adrenaline, and for the first time in 15 years, she allowed herself to really feel something. She held this stranger's hand and whispered, "You're going to be okay. I've got you. You're safe now." Then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the inside of the patient's left wrist, barely visible beneath the hospital bracelet, was a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. Rebecca's vision blurred, and the room started spinning because she knew that birthmark. She'd kissed that birthmark 1,000 times when Daniel was a baby. She'd held that tiny wrist in her hand on the last day she ever saw him. Her son had that exact birthmark in that exact spot, but this was impossible. Daniel was gone. He'd been declared dead. This was just a coincidence, just trauma and exhaustion making her see things that weren't there, except Rebecca couldn't stop staring. She grabbed the patient's chart with trembling hands and looked at his estimated age, 20 years old, which would make him born around the same year as Daniel. She studied his face more carefully now, looking past the bruises and swelling, and she saw features she recognized. The shape of his nose, the curve of his eyebrows, the small scar on his chin that Daniel had gotten when he fell off his tricycle at age 4. Rebecca's knees buckled and she had to grab the bedrail to stay upright. She called for a DNA test immediately, claiming she needed to identify the patient for medical records. And then she spent the next 3 days barely leaving his bedside while she waited for results. She held his hand, talked to him even though he was unconscious, and prayed harder than she'd prayed in 15 years. When he finally opened his eyes on the 4th day, he looked confused and scared, and Rebecca had to use every ounce of professional training not to break down. She asked him his name, and he said it so quietly she almost didn't hear him. He said, "They called me Alex, but that's not my real name. I don't know what my real name is." He told her fragments of a story that made Rebecca's heart shatter and heal at the same time. He'd been taken as a child, raised by people who weren't his parents, moved from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to go to school or make friends. He'd escaped 2 months ago when he turned 20, had been living on the streets trying to figure out who he was and where he came from, but he had no memories before age 6 and no idea how to find his real family. The DNA results came back that evening, and they confirmed what Rebecca already knew in her soul. This was Daniel, her son. The child she'd mourned for 15 years was alive, was lying in a hospital bed, was looking at her with eyes that held so much pain and confusion. Rebecca broke protocol, broke every professional boundary, and she told him the truth. She told him about the park, about the search, about the 15 years she'd spent wondering if he was cold or hungry or scared. She told him about the birthmark she used to kiss, about the way he used to laugh, about how she'd never stopped being his mother even when the world told her he was gone. And Daniel, who'd been called Alex for so long, he'd almost forgotten there was another name. He looked at this woman who'd saved his life and he said, "I dreamed about you. All these years, I had this dream of a woman with kind eyes who used to sing to me. I thought I'd made you up." They held each other and cried in that hospital room, and Rebecca realized that she'd been given the rarest of gifts, a second chance. She'd saved her son's life twice, once by refusing to give up in the ER, and once by never giving up hope, even when everyone else had moved on. The police got involved, arrests were made, and Daniel's kidnappers were brought to justice. But the real story isn't about revenge or closure. It's about a mother's instinct that reached across 15 years and recognized her child, even when logic said it was impossible. It's about the fact that Rebecca had saved hundreds of lives in her career, but the one that mattered most was the one she'd been preparing for her entire life without knowing it. If this story touched your heart, if it reminds you that miracles do happen and that a mother's love transcends time and trauma, then smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because these are the real stories that prove truth is stranger than fiction. And drop a comment telling me, do you believe in mother's intuition? Have you ever felt a connection to someone you couldn't explain? Share your story below because your voice matters and your experience could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, never give up hope, never stop fighting, and never underestimate the power of love to bring us back to where we belong.